8:03
Hold on,
a.m.
did we start?
And I'm calling the curriculum committee to order. Should we go around and take attendance?
That sounds great.
Okay, I'm Erin Dove, a school board member.
Kevin, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, I'm Kevin Hyde. I'm the curriculum coordinator.
I'm Heidi, Heidi Spingola, also a curriculum coordinator.
Laura Jackson, Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning.
Connie Schmidt, school board member.
Jennifer Boyer, Office of Curriculum.
Jen Wimmer, superintendent. All right, we went all the way around.
Okay. Laura, do you want to start us off? I have the curriculum calendar open. Is that what I should be referring to?
The first, in board docs is the agenda.
Okay.
And the first item on the agenda is academic progress. It's a local assessment update.
Okay.
And I did not jump into screen share, so let me just back out and do that quick.
Well, I have a computer next to me, so I'll bring it up myself anyway.
Okay, hold on. Okay. This is.
Okay.
I'm gonna share the doc with you separately. Because it's a presentation, it's not on the board docs.
In case you didn't hear Laura, she said she's sharing the presentation with you separately.
Okay. I got it.
Okay, perfect. And so every year around this time, we give an academic progress update. And typically that includes our, depending on the timing of the state, the release of the state report cards. And in the spring of the year, when the state assessments were canceled, the state also announced that they were not going to do a public release of report cards. So we won't be discussing that at all. We also typically at this time of year give our STAR assessment results and talk about those a little bit. And given the current, how the spring of the year ended, just feedback I had gotten, the concern and the question was, how does this fall compare to last fall? And what are we seeing and how are we managing that? So today's STAR assessment report simply goes over reading and math academic data, comparing fall of 2019 to fall of 20.
Did they say why? Is it because of the spring distance learning, or is it because some schools are virtual and some aren't, some are combined, just so that you can't do an apples to apples comparison? Did they give that specific reason? I assume that's what it would be, but I'd like
the
to.
shutdown that we had,
Yeah.
I'm glad you asked because it's good to say that publicly.
Yeah.
In the state assessment windows are, we took the ACT assessment, which is for 11th graders in Wisconsin in February. And so that was prior to the shutdown. We did not get the makeup day in. Then the state of Wisconsin shut down in March, and that ended up extended to the end of this school year. With the shutdown in March, our last day of in-person attendance was March 13th. The state gave schools until Wednesday of the following week, which, if I recall correctly, would have been about the 17th, to.
The 17th was a Tuesday.
Okay.
I know because I came home from Africa on March 15th, which was a Sunday.
Okay. Yeah, so as of that Wednesday, then all schools were shut down. The normal assessment window for our ACT Aspire, which is 9th and 10th grade, and Wisconsin Forward, which is 4th through 8th plus 10th grade social studies, is in April and May. And with schools shut down and there was no way to do those assessments, to do them equitably and to do them with the test security that's required. So therefore, both the federal government waived the requirement and the state waived the state assessments.
So it's really more because of the shutdown than because of the, I don't want to say inequity, but just difficulty of how the variety of methods of instruction started this fall. From what you,
Yeah,
from what
right,
I-
it's
is that-
all
is that
because of
I'm
what
hearing?
happened in spring, that there's not a report card release.
Okay,
And the data that they have is attendance data, it is the previous 2 years of academic data plus the 11th grade ACT scores. They don't have all of the other academic data that they typically use in developing those results.
and because it does include past years, this is gonna be part of the mix going forward for a couple years then?
Correct.
A little asterisk in the results, okay.
Yeah, and
Good.
it normally contains 3 years of data. And we recently exited the period where we had different assessments included in computing that data. So
Okay,
you're right, at the next few years, this will be a factor as well.
okay, good, I just like to understand. Thank you.
And currently, the federal government has not waived the ESSA requirements for reporting for this year. So as of this time, we're anticipating that we will be doing state assessments in February and then again, April and May. We also have the access test that normally starts in December. The access test is administered to all our English language learners that are not considered proficient in the English language. And that administration typically begins in December and the window closes early February. Well, the assessment has been pushed back to February at this time. So we're not doing it now and it'll be pushed back to February. This is the first year that ACT is giving the opportunity to take the test statewide, online versus paper. And you still have to do it with proper test security and in your building. It's not that you can take the ACT from home. So,
Okay.
but that option exists for districts and for this spring,
It's an option, it's not all of them, okay,
yeah. Well, if you do it, it's all.
okay.
And it also extends the administration. If it's paper, it's all in one day, all in one sitting.
What is West Bend School District doing?
So the high school team met this week, and their preference, the identified preference right now is to do it online in school.
Online from the school, okay.
Can I just ask, our guests are having trouble hearing, so could you guys just, when you're talking, speak up a little bit?
I'm sorry.
Otherwise, I have to carry it to you guys, that'd be kind of silly. Thank you.
All right, so the STAR administration, we do 3 different STAR assessments, and we do, in fall, we do the early literacy, the reading, and the math. And our goal for test participation is 95% or higher. We did not do a fall administration for our virtual students. And we only did our in-person students. So that's going to impact our test participation rates because we do through 10th grade, but we did not do virtual students. So our K1, the test participation rate is on there. And we had 39% of our K1 students proficient in fall of 2019 and 36% in fall of 2020. When we look at our students and look at one of our asks is how did the shutdown and not being in physical school from March to September impact our students? And so kindergarten students that were kindergartners last year are first graders this year. And you can see on the chart, the green highlighted area shows that cohort of students that were in kindergarten last year and first grade this year. So you can see a decline of the proficiency rate in reading in early fall from last year to this year.
Wow. And that's with 95% participation, so you are including most kids, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So this is for grades 2 through 10, all lumped together, the overall proficiency rate in fall of 2019 and the overall proficiency rate in fall of 2020. Again, the participation rate is down. And then we'll take a look at by grade level, and it's again highlighted so that you can follow a cohort of students from fall to fall. Because when you look at, yeah?
Should I assume the participation rate is down because at the higher grades you have more virtual learners?
That is
Or
our
can you not make
assumption.
that correlation?
That's our assumption at this time, yes.
Okay.
So when you follow the cohort of students, you can see some had a greater percentage of decline. Again, we're comparing a different percentage of students taking the test as well.
Will there be a plan for testing virtual learners in the future?
Correct. So our virtual learners, we're planning on them taking the STAR during the January window, December-January window.
You
So-
may want, if you want for them, you could repeat the question,
Yeah.
because I'm sure they can't hear, I'm the one that can't hear.
The question was, are we going to, do we have a plan for including our virtual students in the assessment in the future? And the plan is in January, we will be including them in the assessment, in the STAR assessment. We'll do it again with them at the end of the year so that we can look for growth from mid to end.
Okay.
So as you've had a moment to look at the data numbers and follow the cohort of second graders from when they were in second grade in fall last year to third grade this year, are there any questions or observations you want to talk about? And just to let you know, the next slide talks about some of the things we did in spring to get ready for a predicted decline.
Did 10th graders look good?
So last spring, we knew that the end of the year from March on really did not have the same approach as we would have done in person. And there were differences in what the students were exposed to from previous years. So one of the things we did in spring was at every site, the principals planned in grade level crosswalks and data examination and discussion of curricular adjustments that were made. So what I mean by that is kindergarten and first grade teachers met to talk about the data, that the kindergartners' data as they're gonna head into first grade the following year, as well as any curriculum adjustments that were made. Then those first grade teachers also met with the second grade teachers to do the same, to talk about the first grade student data and curricular adjustments that were made so that the second grade teachers at the site had that information going into the following school year and actually leading into summer. So the elementary fourth grade teachers got together with the Silverbrook fifth grade teachers and did the same. Silverbrook sixth grade got together with Badger seventh, Badger eighth got together with high school by department, and then at the high school, within departments that have a continuous flow. So math has a continuous flow, English has a continuous flow. Social studies, when we're going from world geography, and we'll have discrete courses in social studies. We'll have discrete courses in science. So whether the students were in biology, the next course is chemistry. It's not a direct tie-in from biology to chemistry. It's not a direct build-on. So the teachers had those discussions. This is pertaining to literacy, and I have a very similar slide for math. But we had some discussion in spring about whether or not even to do STAR assessment in the fall. And we had a lot of discussion about that, and teachers really wanted that data to have a good glimpse of where their students were in the moment so that they could use that to inform their instruction. And based on that teacher feedback, we did do the STAR assessment in fall. Originally, we were considering not doing it based on what we predicted and not wanting to frustrate, but the data information was important for practice. So we did continue with the STAR assessment, and we did continue with the Fountas and Pennell assessment in fall as well. At the start of the school year, using what the staff had began to incorporate last year and identify as independent structures. Those were some of the early implementation features of the comprehensive literacy model approach. And so starting off with the independent structures and the gradual release model, using those things in order to help boost our students and really work with them at their individual levels are really important. And so continuing with those practices, continuing with the modeling of instruction, modeling of what the students are going to do with their independent practice was important. And then the revision of practice. So back to spring. I thought that was in one of their houses at first. The revision of practice, again, was important for planning for fall. STAR math proficiency overall, grades 1, this is overall, everybody in grades 1 through 10. In fall of 2019, we were at 39%. In fall of 2020, 33%. Again, the participation rate in the assessment did decline, as we discussed. Students who are 10th grade and above do not, above 10th grade or in 9th and 10th grade and in an Algebra 2 or higher do not take the STAR assessment. And then here is the similar data chart as we looked at with literacy, and where if you follow the yellow and the green, you can see how the cohort of students scored in the fall of 2019 compared to the fall of 2020. And we'll take a minute just to look through that data. During the summer, so we followed a similar approach as with literacy in having the discussions by grade level about the curriculum, the students specifically, and the curricular adjustments made, so that the teachers who would be receiving the students the following year would know where they left off. Additionally, as a system, we had K-5 teachers coming in to discuss Bridges curriculum and look ahead at this fall. And we had a discussion about instruction that wasn't provided to the level that it normally is, and how we needed to make what we needed to do to adjust for that during the fall of the year. And then looking at those instructional goals that really needed to be firmed up. The first grade teachers and the second grade teachers collaborated and developed the plan for taking that first grade curriculum and weaving it through the second grade year, so that prior to a unit starting or embedded within a unit of study, the students could, or the teachers could then provide that instruction that was missed or that was not hit to the level of understanding that it would have been in person. And so one example of that is like teen numbers. And what kindergarten did with teen numbers last year does not compare what they do in a normal year. So first grade knew they needed to hit teen numbers really, really solidly. Same thing with first grade did not hit place value to the extent that they would have in person. So second grade, this fall, second grade teachers knew that they have to, as they're doing place value, step back a little bit and reintroduce some things. And so those plans were made for this fall, so that to help address this situation that we see reflected in the data, and that we know could be predicted based on how spring went. Are there any questions about that? This is the document of the, so I'm going to go back to the data first. So this is the similar, where curriculum adjustments were made, STAR assessment was done, pre-assessments in math helped to really identify any gaps in instruction that are present. And I talked about the team number example. So I think that is our last slide in the, yeah. So we made some predictions and we have the exact data from STAR assessment. So we'll keep you updated, but are there any further discussion on the data?
Would you say you're surprised at any of it, or do you think that was what was going to happen, what was going to show?
Yeah.
And then also with that, do you think, so STAR again is January-ish, do you think we will see the improvements at least back up to where we were in fall of 19?
I expect that we'll see improvements, and what we'll look at is winter to winter comparison again. So it will again have had, if we talk about in math, infractions, if that unit, which I believe happens in February or March, in the grade levels that it's introduced, that it's worked on in, I believe that won't show, that aspect of mathematics is not going to show the improvements yet, because the teachers will do that prior to teaching that unit. And so they'll add in extra practice and review of what would have been taught, which may not have been done to the same extent. So, or would have been done without follow-up practice for the remainder of the year. So I think we'll see it if we look at a comparison by strand of mathematics. We'll see improvements in certain areas, but those that haven't been covered yet will probably still show some decline.
Just a random observation, the 8th graders into 9th graders improved greatly on math and did much more poorly than others on reading. So apparently they spent their summer doing math problems.
That's a
Interesting.
They were watching the COVID test data come in.
Singular focus.
Mhm.
Tani said they were doing a lot of data analysis over the summer as they're watching COVID results come in.
Okay.
Any other thoughts?
I'm really happy that we're continuing to do this and that this is a priority because, I mean, whatever a new normal is, we need to keep measuring students' progress and growth and, I mean, the decline is somewhat to be expected after nearly 6 months away from the buildings, so. And I would imagine that the kids that did well in the spring virtually are maybe some of the ones that chose the virtual option and they're not in these numbers, because this is all the in-person students, so. Yeah, these are the kids that really struggled in the spring, so they really did have it's like a double summer drop. So, thank you for this.
And I, when we look at elementary as a whole, was not using Google Classroom and then made a very fast shift to that and then had to introduce families and students to that on the fly in the spring. And part of their focus this year is to be introducing their students to that all along and doing instruction that can translate a little more rapidly to because we never know if where our numbers are going to be. And we've, at this point, been able to have some students at home and not have any full classroom or full school shutdowns, so.
I am
preparing, I mean, we want people to be ready for anything.
Absolutely, yeah, and no one could have seen what happened in the spring coming, so I'm glad that we're going to be prepared if that needs to happen again. I'm excited about seeing the results when we are able to include the virtual academy students in the mix. Yeah. That'll be interesting.
All right, I'm gonna turn that on. Our next agenda topic is the virtual academy elective classes. And one of the questions that Erin Dove had asked is how many of our, are there elective courses that seem to be more popular among the virtual students that maybe are things we should look to be adding to our course, our in-person instruction in the future? And so in looking at the number of enrollments in sections and eliminating graduation required courses, like this specific course is required for your graduation, I looked at the number of students enrolled in various electives, and sign language is pretty popular amongst those seeking a world language or an additional elective course. Sign language continues to be, is popular. Gothic literature and mythology really have a lot of enrollments for the English electives. And when I asked the counselors this question, those were the first 3 classes that they talked about as they're monitoring their students in the virtual program. And they talked about those 3 immediately. And in going through, again, those have a lot of enrollments in those 3 courses. The sociology course online is a popular, not a graduation requirement, but it is a very popular class in the virtual program. Criminology and cybersecurity are also popular. The students seem to be very interested in those courses as electives. In general, career classes are popular. Career courses to have they're either an introduction to or the principles of. And so those are the headings behind the class. An introduction to nursing and principles of agriculture and food sciences. Those career courses that are focused on exploring a specific career opportunity are really popular.
Those are gonna be hard, other than those 2, which are probably very popular, those smaller ones that I think it's exciting that we can offer those, because we wouldn't be able to offer them in person if it's just onesies, twosies sort of thing. I know with the issues we've had with Edmentum, it's been mentioned that we might be building our own version, or something like it. Is there a discussion of making those classes not just in person, but also they must be, are we gonna use West Bend School teacher to maybe teach these classes if they've been popular with the Adventum instructors?
So that is, as we look at our virtual program going forward, in Ebola, I'm using the previous name, Ebola. Ebola, as we developed that program, we limited the number of seats, period. So, and not like by child, but by number of courses that could be taken. So if I signed up and was the first one to sign up and you were the fifth, you might be waiting to see what I registered for. Because if I'm registering for one, there's probably space for you. But if I'm registering for my entire virtual program, by the time we get to student number 5, there may be no seats left.
Okay.
And there are, as we had talked about in the summer, there are kids who had been in that program all along, and we were going to allow them to continue with that provider. Regardless of the provider you look at, there are career courses. So as we look to expand our program and improve it for the future, having our teachers teaching some of the classes virtually, I think is very realistic. I think if we want a comprehensive program, part of our ongoing discussion has to be, who would we partner with for these courses? So currently, we have had students going to Kewaskum to take agriculture classes over the past few years, because when it was course options where they could go, or now part-time open enrollment, they can go to Kewaskum, who offers that class, but we don't. And so if that's something that's really important to their future, they're gonna go take that. And if we are able to offer some of that online, now the Principles Hub is an overview class, an A class that has animal husbandry. You're not gonna get that in a virtual program. And that's one that you would still part-time open enroll for.
Mm-hmm.
But so Tani, yes to all of that.
Okay.
We do intend to really explore having our teachers teach some of the classes virtually, but for this comprehensive program, we won't necessarily have enough. The child development and parenting class, each year our capstone class in that program is very small. And then we always hinge on, should we be offering this or not, offering this or not? And it's unfortunate because it is the capstone class, and but the numbers run low. And if they have a boost early, and then when schedules are filtered out, we have 8 kids, 10 kids, as schedules filtered out. Having the opportunity for them to still take it online would be beneficial to them. And so when we look at a really well-defined program, having some opportunities that we can't provide in person, but can provide virtually, will be helpful.
That's great. And even if kids are taking an hour, well, they're in the building, but they're sitting in a study hall or something and taking their class virtually, so, I mean, I just think that's fantastic that you're thinking about all this.
I think the new library design is set up well to allow a student who's in person for 5 of their classes to take a 6th virtually. And that might be something, in person we don't offer veterinary science, and if you think you want to explore that, to be able to take that and weed that out before you get to college, or have it be your focus when you get to college, is really helpful.
I'm a big fan of weeding things out in high school. It's very expensive to weed it out in college.
Yep. Yeah. The law enforcement class was really popular for the high school students, the principles of law enforcement and criminal justice. World language has been interesting. We have the long sequence in West Bend, which has us taking one semester, the first semester of high school world language over the course of 5th and 6th grade. The long sequence part of that was really important as this program was developed, has the students learning it slowly over one semester of high school over 5th and 6th grade every other day. Putting all of that in, so with our students in the virtual program, 6th grade students who were taking world language took the whole first semester of high school world language. 7th grade took the whole second semester of high school world language, just like they would have done in person. And the opportunity to do that over a long sequence rather than in one tight semester is significant. Additionally, the rigor is greater than our in-person world language, so that has been an area where there have been lots and lots of questions from parents and lots of concerns raised.
In what way? Like
But the rigor, the level of rigor.
they're concerned that the virtual's too hard, or that why isn't our in-person as
Their
challenging?
concern
Or is
is,
it lacking?
yeah, their concern is that it's too hard. And the virtual is too hard, the pacing is tight. We did look at the level of, the level of rigor and with our teachers, had our teachers look at the course syllabus and for the in-person for those sections. And they talked about when we normally cover things. And so even the conjugation of verbs is taught much earlier in the virtual program than it is in person. And they talked about the in-person class being really designed to firm up some things, but I think we have to do some more investigation over the next opportunities we have to collaborate. Are there any questions or other comments from anybody on, Tim, any comments? Jenna, any comments? Kevin, any comments on virtual electives?
No, you mentioned all the ones that I thought were pretty popular.
Erin, any questions on?
Some of those we do offer in person, correct? So it's
The-
not like, if we would be looking to expand curriculum to classes that are popular in the virtual academy, it doesn't necessarily mean they're new classes.
Correct.
Like sociology,
Sociology we have in person.
and I think there is like a mythology class.
Yep.
Mythology and folklore, they cover a little different things, but that
Okay.
seemed to be a very popular elective. And the other one that we have is like,
Even the elective, you were including, students who perhaps are in person, but just a class stood out to them on virtual academy and they're taking that class as an elective.
correct, I looked at the number of enrollments and,
Okay.
oh, that's Nancy, she wants to give it, I'm gonna get her. It's touchscreen. Nancy Jessman is just joining us now through virtually. Yeah, and the intro to nursing class is different than our CNA classes. I didn't include, there are a few students taking CNA in here in the virtual program, but I didn't include that because of, we offer that in person. Sociology just had so many that it really stood out. Same thing with the mythology. It stood out enough that it was worth mentioning. Our next agenda item is an update on year 2 of literacy implementation.
I'm just going to turn this to make it easier for you guys to hear me. So in June, I spent some time updating the board on what we had done with our literacy implementation during the 1920 school year and the modifications we needed to make due to the pandemic. And then I updated on what our anticipated next steps were going to be as a result. We had anticipated, hoping to originally begin implementing new units of study this school year. That timeline got pushed back to hoping to beginning that implementation at semester time. And we are now at a point where we are actually looking to push back that timeline even more to beginning the implementation of developing or implementing the new units of study to be developed now for the 21-22 school year. Given that our teacher teams make up a large consortium of who is doing that work and the capacity that they have given the current instructional environment, we just don't have the capacity to ask them to do a ton more work right now and have it be a job well done. So we are hoping to delay that work. As far as timeline, our goal would be to try to get the first quarter developed during the second semester and train teachers on that in June before they leave for the summer. So at least they have time in the summer to digest their first unit, look through that, be familiar with it, and that was at the teacher request. They said, don't train me on something that I have to implement 2 days later because that's when my students are walking in the door. Give me some time to look at it, give me some time to digest it, ask questions. So that would be our first goal. The second goal would be to get roughly quarters 2 and 3 done over the summer months, and then quarter 4 done next fall, and then have those training timelines follow where it makes sense. The biggest hurdle we're facing is, again, that teacher capacity and their timeline to develop those units, asking them to do after school work, compensating them for that, and those types of things when they are already feeling stretched thin. So that is something we are working to problem solve with that committee. That committee has already come together 2 times this summer. We spent some time building some common background knowledge of the new standards that we will be utilizing, as well as the process that we will utilize to develop our units. I did link on the summary, there's a unit template. It's just a first grade one. It's relatively blank except for the standards that are in there. Just so that you can see when it's done being developed, every unit will have a template like this that has everything filled out with it. This is the UBD template that is referenced in the summary that has been in the district for a while that we would be moving forward with. Other than developing those units of study, we are just working to continue to improve the practices we learned last year, refine them and make them better, and not really bring anything new on this year as far as a new practice. And then we'll work to continue bringing in other best practices next school year when hopefully we're in a more stable teaching and learning environment. Questions or thoughts about the modifications to that timeline?
I mean, it sounds like you have had discussions with the groups involved in that, and they feel comfortable with this timeline.
I think everybody is disappointed. They'd all love to have new units right now, but I think they know that they just don't have the capacity to do so. I have had, no email has gone out to the larger staff as a whole yet at this point, letting everybody know pending kind of today's meeting. But after today, then I would hope to notify the rest of the district that we're not going to have new units come semester time. It's going to be pushed back just given where we're at.
Yeah, makes sense. And learning a new unit in June before school ends as they're trying to wrap up a school year, you don't see any issues with that?
I think we'll have to kind of wait and see what happens this school year and then decide. Their feedback has always been, I don't want to learn it in August right before I start teaching. So if it's not as they're trying to wrap up the school year, I would anticipate needing to pay people to come in and be trained at some point during the summer months, which poses a whole other set of, issues with people being on vacations and things like that. So I think we'd have to kind of see what semester 2 brings and adjust as necessary to be responsive to whatever environment we're in at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions? The only other thing worth mentioning is the K-8 tentative scope and sequence that was updated September 2020. This has been modified from the one that was shared in June with the board. There were, as a result of that work this summer, there were a few units that we realized were not, it's the giant 11 by 17 sheet, if it helps you. There were a few units that just were not coming together like we had hoped. So we had modified those themes. You'll notice that they are in italicized font and it says new theme. For example, quarter 4 of 4th grade was modified, quarter 1 of 5th grade, and then 1 in 6th and 7th grade as well. So they each just had a slight modification there. In addition, our 9th grade high school team has reached out to show interest in also being a part of this process. While they were not a part of the work in August that we started, we would look to loop some of them into the future work going forward. So we would actually have a K-9 scope and sequence versus a K-8 scope and sequence. So we are in the beginning stages of bringing them on to do that with our team as well. Any questions or concerns about the updated scope and sequence?
So it hasn't been, this, the only where it says new theme has something been changed?
Yes. So it used to be a theme that was specifically connected to some social studies content, and there were some areas where we just were not having the best connections that we were hoping to make. So rather than trying to force a connection that wasn't really there, we shifted the focus there to our SEL connections for our SEL work as a district, our social emotional learning work, and those are where those connections came into those tier 1 resources and those tier 1 curriculums. So that we're still making those cross-curricular connections for students, just in a slightly different way for those particular units.
So they're all social studies except for this one science, quarter 4, 6th grade?
It actually won't be anymore. It is going to be that idea of friendships with the social conflict. So it won't actually have a connection to social studies or science. It will have that social emotional learning connection there. And all of the ones that say new theme, those 4 that are identified, those were all of those decisions were made with feedback from the curriculum team at that identified grade level.
Further erosion of the falls, workers built a massive wall and a concrete.
All right, I'm going to turn this back to Laura so she can keep our agenda going.
Actually, Jen Wimmer's gonna lead this section out, so if you don't mind.
I hijacked. Morning, I hijacked this think tank to talk about the instructional calendar. I know that we talked about it a little bit at our board meeting around looking at something new. Nancy and Aaron, I just sent you the link. It's right on our webpage, the calendar. And the discussion that we had, I'm gonna kind of point out some things for those in the room. We're centered around November, our return from Thanksgiving break. We have a full week of school here. And what we need to do is disrupt probably increased exposure to families, gatherings, potential travel, etc. And we need to get us out of the quarantine game and reduce transmissions in school. It's all about 6 feet and 15 minutes. And I do not have 6 feet everywhere. So I just wanted to talk through with your board member hat on, with your parent hat on, some ideas before I put them out to all the staff to really kick around. So we can bring a full recommendation to the board for quick action. So we did survey our families around potential for childcare. We know we would continue to serve meals and have access that way, so we're not creating an undue hardship. But our teachers certainly need planning for instructional time. So if you made the return a planning day, so it would be an additional day off, it's connected to the break, so if families were kind of getting recentered or traveling back from, maybe grandma and grandpa's. A lot of the discussion is around making an A-B schedule upon return, so kind of splitting your alphabet or splitting, if you are a high school schedule, I'm going to teach half my periods in one day and half the other, so kids are coming for half their schedule, and doing an A-B block or AABB. In their schedules, so that kids were reporting a couple days that week, which would allow minimizing group size, so that we would have the 6 feet that we need. That would buy us about a week. Statistically, most of your symptoms are coming in that 5 to 7 day range post last exposure to a potential positive case. So it gives us that week. I think anything longer than a week, while 2 weeks would be most beneficial, I don't know what your thoughts are on stretching it to 2 weeks. That might feel long, burdensome, and that kind of going in and out are some of the cons that I see. So I just really wanted to surface discussion, thoughts, ideas from the team. And then we could do something very similar post that winter break when we return in January.
If we do it for 2 weeks, then there's only a week and a half regular before Christmas or winter break.
Right, it's a tight
Yeah.
timeline for that level of disruption. Now, you do see some in the area doing more of a block of going virtual in those 3 weeks, kind of to cover that.
I guess if you want to do an AV, I'm not opposed to it, but I would say do it for the whole 3.5 weeks. Potentially, I mean, just throwing that out there, I'm not.
Sure. Here's what we know from the short term at the high school. It's hard to have and for everyone really, it's hard for our instructors to be living in both worlds.
Yeah.
They're presenting in person, plus doing virtual, simultaneous. You're having to plan for 2 modalities. Anything that we could do to help give them just planning time around what it is they're gonna be doing and getting them in kind of one world for that time frame, I think that would be beneficial.
You're talking about district-wide, you're not separating out the high school from.
Right, or we could, I mean, that's certainly, like you said, it could be different by level as well.
I would imagine the combo is harder at the younger levels than at the high school, but that's an assumption I'm making.
Yeah, it is, and then also sometimes you're taking out your older kids who play a role in childcare
Yeah.
as well. So that's where really, like I said, that family perspective of, to me, having a consistent schedule that I know about and can plan for is probably easier as a parent, as a family, and as a child.
I agree. So
For that.
if you did do the AB, so you've got like the whole family home or not.
So if you did an AB schedule, an every other day, or like we said, statistically, you might do 2 days in a row, then another 2 days in a row, kind of thing. You just want to give yourself breaks. What I know from other systems who have done that, that day that a kid is home is supposed to be a learning day, and that is minimized. So it feels like, to families and to kids, it feels like a loss of something, and it's hard to combat that. In virtual instruction, you don't have a synchronous schedule. It's not good for kids. You are compacting a virtual day into about 4 hours, even for your older kids. You don't want them glued to a screen. You don't want, so it does feel like a loss, though. So I just wanted to kind of surface and talk about and think about all those kind of pros, cons, ideas before we.
So this is Nancy, I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
So if we did this AB or AABB, whatever,
Sure.
that's kind of immaterial at this
Yep.
point. My question is, what about the kids, especially the high school kids right now, who are 100% virtual, and they're choosing to do that? I know that you're all sick of hearing it, but they're choosing to do it because of sports for the most part. They don't want to get knocked out of their sports program. So will they still be able to stay 100% virtual if they wanted to, or does everyone have to go to this AB or AABB schedule?
I don't think we would need to force it at the high school level. We had such success in the step out, providing people with choice of the step out. I think what's really hard is they've been limping that along week by week, and it does not provide consistency for instruction. So if we identified this span and it was a short-term commitment, then teachers could do some shifts in the schedule, or a department leader could say like, hey, I'm gonna take point on the virtual stuff while we do this. They could kind of recombobulate a little bit. So I think there is that opportunity, and I think we've been successful this entire time because we continue to provide opportunities for choice for people. And I think we have some areas where we could do choice and target that kind of month at that secondary level specifically.
So when we look at this, we'd be looking at kind of the 2 weeks. I mean, when you're looking at this whole thing, you're kind of looking at 2 weeks of right after Thanksgiving, and then you'd look at the first 2 weeks of January as well. Is that kind of, just so I understand the dates that we're trying to target?
Yeah, minimally a week following each break. 2 weeks would be ideal.
Okay. I get, you know, as a parent, my only experience is at the high school right now, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to speak to the elementary, you know, parent concerns. But obviously, we've done some surveying. It sounds like, I guess, you know, I agree that allowing children or families, it's probably a family decision, that opportunity to either be 100% virtual or do this type of scheduling. I mean, I know some of our neighbor schools are doing it. Like, Jen, I don't know if you've reached out, but like, how is it working? I know Campbellsport's doing that AABB schedule, at least for the high school. How are there, I know they're much smaller school, but are there cases that much less? I mean, is it
Actually,
really that beneficial?
when you speak about Campbellsport, they closed recently due to cases and inability to staff. So they've been closed and virtual. I think they're going into their second full district week, third for majority of schools. In one of the other neighbors, they have kind of what the high school's doing right now. And the high school's been putting it in play. It's only stretched this long because they don't have their kind of next iterations of schedules done. They've been doing that where kids at the high school level specifically can step in and out at any time, and that is really difficult. It's really difficult to manage. It's really difficult right now, we're living it for our teachers. They might have 4 kids in a class. There's so many variables there. Like, I wouldn't want that long term for our teachers or our kids. And then some are doing AB, but it just kind of depends. Like, Slinger's doing a modified block. You know, Nicolet's doing a block, but they're largely virtual hybrid. So I think there's ways we could construct it. I think our teachers have really good ideas. They've been living with some of these things and driving it to some problem solving around what some common barriers have been. I had foreshadowed this to all staff so that they knew, and so we could kind of talk about what are our options. So if we came up with a recommendation that had some kind of element of choice, had consistency, made sense instructionally, but could look different by level with our options, and we're open to, because it's such a weird tight timeline, something in the middle of those 2 breaks for discussion and exploration.
So like Nancy, I just, as a parent, come at with the high school perspective, and living that and having multiple quarantines and things like that. I know this will depend on how broadly we go about this, if it's a district-wide thing where we need teenagers becoming caregivers or whatever that looks like, but I know having a set timeline for the high school students, a set structure, like you need to be on this call at 9 a.m. is way better than the willy-nilly, do it when you want situation that we had in spring. Not only for their instruction, but socially, that they're connecting with their classroom. So that's just one point I would want to make. And then I know it's a really tight timeline with the 2 weeks, but we have to look at January. That 2 weeks takes us to semester break and exam time. And what does that look like for high schoolers? who maybe aren't able to connect virtually as well as they could in person, and losing that aspect of their instruction going into an exam.
I think you're right in then what could we open up and target and make it look different with that in mind, and what do we need to do? I think our students will have some probably good ideas if we talk with them too. Right now, the high school administrators have been meeting with individual departments around ideas and things that they've run into to problem solve, to create some opportunity. But hearing you on, like you said, more structured, so even if it were less in that time away, making it feel structured and like a cohesive day.
Both Heidi and Kevin are parents of elementary students, and Heidi's students attend another neighboring district, and they've been doing some different things. If we want to.
How's that feel, Mom?
So right now, my kids are in a neighboring district, they're 5 days a week virtual. I am going to be honest, I am a little nervous to see what it looks like after Thanksgiving. I think your idea of offering choice to families of either being full virtual or some type of AABB thing, I think that's really powerful. I think the sooner we let families know, the better. I will also say, as an elementary parent perspective, who doesn't have older kids at home to help with childcare, the idea of saying it's an AABB and saying, okay, every Monday, Tuesday, my kids are at home and I have to arrange for childcare is just easier mentally to figure out than like in, out, in, out, in, out for my own personal family's work schedules for the adults in my house. I can't speak for all families. The district I'm in, that my kids attend, happens to have 3 different plans by level. I know that they are having issues with that ABAB plan, still having a relative high number of students needing to go into quarantine as a result. I think they are having better luck with their AABB schedule in that particular district.
Statistically, the AABB, it's that 48-hour look-back period, so it keeps you with one cohort impacted versus crossing the line of 2. And that's the why behind that.
That makes sense.
I like your point around consistency, and it'll probably be more consistent for our childcare partners if they can do it by block as well. So we'll talk with them.
I also just, somewhat as my teacher hat and parent hat, I look at the fact of staying out 1 to 2 weeks in December, and then then they're possibly coming back for another week and a half. I just think about the transition times between all of that and the time you're going to take to, as a teacher for younger kids, reteach expectations, routines, procedures. I wonder if that's worth it for a weekend, well, for essentially 7 days, or if we are better off just keeping that schedule consistent until Christmas break or whatever for that elementary learner who takes more time to navigate those transitions.
That makes sense to me, and I'm glad you're weighing in as a parent of young kids without older kids, because my biggest concern is parents that have to go to work and and like you said, I like the AABB. I think that's easier to deal with, and knowing in advance and some consistency. I'd be in favor of going through December straight.
With the right plan.
The same thing, just less
Okay.
change.
Okay.
I mean, if we're gonna do it,
Yep.
I'm okay with doing it all the way.
All right. And I think the important thing around the choice for us is making sure that I still have an opportunity to welcome kids to school.
Yes.
Maybe it's not their regular school, maybe it's a different school where there's a program, but getting them to us, making sure that they have meals, and for those families who it would just create undue hardship for childcare, that I have a place and those partners, their technology's here, their stuff's here, like how can we work together? So
Thank you.
they've been stepping up into that and that willingness to create those opportunities for families. So I think, and then we would have the whole school to space people out. Things. And I think another thing we would do differently if we do any kind of virtual, which we have now, is we would keep our buildings open to our staff. I think last year it was really hard when they all had to go home to their living room and create some kind of alternate space, had to do, all this. This gives them that consistency, that school day, all their materials are around them, their teams are there to network and collaborate. I think the other thing really hard is that everyone's creating everything, and how do we as a system support crowdsourcing some of those grade level things? We have 19 people at a grade level. And how do we split that up? And we're not alone either, so how do we network with the area districts? Because it's easier for me to take something and tweak it and personalize it than it is to create it from scratch. So we have to do a better job as an organization. I always laugh and I said, service is my middle name, because we're at the, educational service center, like what are we doing to support that? I answer my phone that way sometimes. But it is, you know what I mean? Like the burden of creation right now is so heavy on our staff that's just what I'm in tune to. How do you help them with the lift so that they can be there for kids? So, all right.
I'm excited about the idea that they can be in the building.
Yeah.
In their,
Yeah.
and and that helps them with having a less chance of getting quarantined too, because they're not gonna have anybody there.
Yes, it does. I mean, you really want healthy kids and healthy staff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, districts are closing because the staff are the ones impacted, not kids, in some spots, so.
And I just want to be really clear, if we are doing this district-wide, I know in general elementary schools haven't been impacted as much as the higher grades, but with the child care and what's available to them, I just want to make sure that is communicated really well to them, because if we are trying to keep the older kids at least on a schedule and they can't be babysitting their little siblings all day, that parents have an avenue for their younger kids.
Yeah.
I guess just one more thing, this is Nancy, always thinking about the PR part of this. I would be careful, and Jen, you've done a great job with this already, but I would be careful with the messaging, so as not to make people think that children will not be quarantined in this situation, because it still could happen. They still could be quarantined if, Johnny or whomever in class, not to pick on the Johnnies of the world, but, if they're next to me and they've got it, I could still be quarantined. So this is a way to hopefully lessen that, but it is certainly still an option, because I would hate to have upset screaming parents like I was, questioning, well, prove to me that this person sat next to you, or whatever the story is, because, that's not going away, and the COVID fatigue is, way beyond fatigue at this point. It's people are really losing their marbles, and it's only going to continue to get worse as this continues to drag out. So I would just want to be very mindful of the fact that teachers and administrators, and obviously our own communication, I'm not as worried about from the district level. I'm more worried about the messaging that's portrayed by teachers or administration to our students, so that that one message gets out there. Like this is a way to lessen that, but it is not a guarantee it will happen. So I think that sometimes the messaging, I get it. Teachers are fatigued as well, so sometimes the messaging just isn't as, I don't know, PC or whatever, on the positive as it should be. So somehow we have to craft that message so that all the teachers are singing the same song, and so are administrators.
Yeah. Well, and I'm so mindful.
Also the message, these steps are being taken to lessen, like Nancy said, but then also with the ultimate goal of returning to in-person school, because that is what the majority of people in our community chose. So that's the ultimate goal.
And I think
These
that,
steps to help get to that point.
our message is to help keep that lane open, right? Because that's what we want to be doing. I think sometimes it's funny, because when I start talking about planning for something, people are like, oh, that's it, we're closing. It's like, no, we're not, but I am going to plan to every nth degree. So as you said in the messaging, so they don't just see it as a precursor to what's to come, because that's not our intent. We've been doing really well with our student numbers, our transmission, applauded by public health, and and Children's Hospital around the steps that schools are taking. So,
It's like that on-ramp on the freeway with the green and the red light. Gotta, you know, we're
Exactly.
just trying to be intentional and
yeah.
slow it, you know.
And I've had a lot of, we sent that message out from all Washington County superintendents yesterday to our families around, yep, we're all exhausted, but like if we can stay with these couple things, and just a lot of positive feedback from our families and our staff around thanks for working together across the whole community. Thanks for these people, thanks for being on it and in attention to helping make school, positive, and so we'll keep staying the course on planning. Okay.
I think all, considering the circumstances, I think you guys are doing an amazing job.
Yeah, I mean,
I
the commitment
really-
from like our staff and everyone, the level of kind of detail and planning and routines and nuances to keep things going is really, yeah, it's a heavy lift, but everyone is doing really good work, so anything that we can give them to support is appreciated, so. All right, we will continue. I'll take those thoughts and that feedback. I appreciate that time so we could dig in a little bit and kind of think about what works. That's all I had.
All right, our next curriculum meeting is in December. Let me just look it up quick, I'm sorry.
It's the 8th.
I think so.
I think I accepted your invitation
Awesome.
last night. Late last night.
Yep, December 8th, that's correct. With regard to the items, the updates that we did, are there any that you feel should go on to the full board for everyone's, or just in board communications?
Go on to the board for approval?
They don't need any approval because they're
No.
just reports?
Just
Um,
what you wanna,
Just in the board communication, or do you think they should be just brought forward for the full board as a discussion?
I
or
think,
Information.
when you say board communication, you mean in an email?
The one that Superintendent Wimmer shares with you.
Yeah, I think in an email's fine. We don't need to,
Yeah.
we don't need to go through all that
I would
again.
agree
And
with
if
that.
anybody wants, they can watch it back. Yeah, let's not waste time.
That's a great point. Alrighty,
So,
Perfect.
that's great. So we're not moving, we have nothing else to move on to the board from this meeting, so that's excellent.
I do want,
Well, the calendar discussion.
I do want to bring something up in relation to the calendar,
Yep.
not the students, but, there is a school board meeting November 30th. That's gonna be at Silver Lining Center, I would think. I know you're most concerned about those first couple days after Thanksgiving break.
Oh, you wanna move it back to that larger space on the 30th?
Right now it's scheduled to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that just optically, it might look bad for us to be imposing this AABB schedule on families, and then we're in here again acting like
Sure.
it's not a big deal, so I guess, I think it might, and since we've got a routine there now, and, everything's set up, and maybe just keep it a little bit longer,
Okay.
something to consider. Erin and Nancy, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime we're in perhaps not fully in-person school, that it should be in a bigger facility so that we're really exercising the social distancing.
Yeah, I never like it when it looks like we have our own set of rules, but for us, but then everybody else has to have these. It's not fair. So,
Yeah, I concur, that's fine with me, it doesn't matter.
Okay, anything else?
I'm good.
Okay, so we will adjourn at 9:17.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.